What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Lee of DonkeyJawProjects.com, and today we are talking about the future of the comic book industry. What's new? What's going on? All that stuff. There's a lot of debate going on. I actually was trying to do this stream for a while, trying to figure out some of the new ways of streaming on YouTube. Now that Hangouts is gone, and it's been a little bit frustrating, but I'm here. I'm doing it. Feel free to chat in the comments. I'd love to hear your input. This is going to be a little bit of a ranty one, and towards the end, I will definitely be checking out the chat and responding. But I just wanted to talk about this today because it's kind of been building. I've had some people actually ask me to do a video about the distribution and the distribution platforms and stuff. Jayendran Subramani, sorry if I'm butchering your name, but he's the one who specifically asked the question about, what's kind of the what we're going to be seeing in the comic industry as far as distribution. And I've also seen this discussion happen online a lot in YouTube videos. And also, I saw a thread on Facebook recently, and I'm going to get to some things from that as well pretty soon. But basically, there's kind of this narrative out there right now about the comics, uh, you know, the comic industry basically dying, or dying a slow death, or maybe it's already dead. And there's also debate of people saying, well, it's not dead, it's actually just changing. And some people are like, you guys are kind of crazy, you're making it look like it's dead, and actually comics are doing better than ever. So there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of things going on. I'm not here to like necessarily debate that as much as I just want to tell you what I see and what I'm thinking as far as what the future of the comic book industry is. Um, Again, I may be right or wrong. I don't know. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think I have some things that are interesting and hopefully will help you, especially if you're a creator, to better navigate this whole thing. I did a video not too long ago about manga, and what can we do to fix the comic industry. This is going to be a little bit similar to that video, but I'm really going to kind of dive into some things a little bit deeper and a little bit from a different angle here. So let's talk about this thing with the world of comics, and how people are kind of saying that it's dying or it's already dead. There is signs that it's not doing too well, at least when you think about the area of superhero comics in America. I think the biggest sign that I see that makes it kind of look like that is kind of the big two, and kind of their decline in sales, and especially in the decline of comic book stores, comic book shops. And the fact that a lot of them are going out of business, have been for years. And so to me, I kind of agree with people who talk about, well, it's not necessarily dying, it's just changing, it's evolving. That's pretty much where the way I'm thinking about it. I think it is still alive. I think comics are alive and well. We can look at a lot of different examples, but in crowdfunding, you know, the comic industry is alive and well and actually starting to thrive. Maybe not even starting; it's kind of on a good track already. And Also, manga comics are doing amazing in America and in Japan and all over the world. We can learn a lot from them, I think. And there's other areas too, where people are kind of branching out into different genres and stuff. If you think of things like Smile from Raina Telgemeier, and Scott Pilgrim, things like that, The Walking Dead, all these comic properties are huge now, and they go way beyond really anything that the typical comic industry is doing. Also, the rise of comic book superhero movies, the MCU, the DC universe on film. I think that's a big thing that's going on. That's interesting. There's also a lot going on in the indie world. Again, crowdfunding. Um, there's people doing Indiegogos. There's people doing Kickstarters, and they're doing really well. Some people aren't doing as well, but some people are. There's just a great opportunity out there for that, and also independent there's independent comic book companies like I think of Alterna. That's one that I really like a lot, and I hope to be involved with someday. Also, like Image Comics has been doing it for a long time, and they've kind of turned a corner going into different genres and stuff, which I think is really cool. There's a lot of other companies and things doing things too. IDW kind of reaches into different aspects, different genres and stuff in a really interesting way. And yeah, I see Dylan Searcy here talking about Comixology. There's digital as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity going on right now, and the comic industry is changing, but I don't think it's dying. One other thing I wanted to talk about. I'm going to get deeper into some of these things I'm kind of mentioning quickly soon, but conventions I think is an interesting thing to talk about. Are conventions worth going to as an indie comic creator, as a pro comic creator? And not that indie isn't pro, but I don't know how to make the distinction, but people who are in, kind of the mainstream comic book industry, is basically a pop culture event, and it's not really about the comics so much. Is it worth going to these big conventions? Is it worth going to small conventions? That's stuff definitely something to talk about, to think about, to debate. I've heard a lot of people talk about, especially on the indie circuit, talking about how they don't really have a lot of success at conventions anymore. So there are some people who do. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but there's a lot of people I've heard struggling and working hard just to make table, and that's doesn't really seem like it's worth it sometimes. I personally think that being able to get in front of people physically, I think it's a really good thing. And any chance you have to do that, that's great. But you also have to think of it, if you are trying to be somebody who is creating a career in comics, you have to think about the money part. You have to think about the business part. And for me personally, well, right now I don't feel like I have enough product really to do at a convention. I could bring my mini comics and stuff. I can bring my anthologies, but I want to have at least one or two of my actual books out personally. But even so, the money it costs to actually go to a convention, unless you are an invited guest and you get the table for free, and the travel expenses and depending how far you're traveling, like all these expenses kind of make it not worth it unless it's like a close show and you can get the table for pretty cheap. It's kind of not worth it. And then also, if you go to a convention that's smaller, there's less traffic, so it's maybe not worth it. But if you go to a bigger one, you might be stuck in some kind of corner and there's less traffic, or people are just not going there for that. So it's really, I think the convention circuit is a tough one. It's a tough nut to crack. I'm not saying it's not worth it at all. These guys at Alterna and stuff, and women at Alterna, I think, are doing some really cool things. Again, I'm very biased towards Alterna, so I'll probably bring them up a lot. But they have a lower cost of entry with their comics at $1.50 to about, now they have giant size for $5, but they have cheaper comics, so it's a lot easier to kind of get sales that way. People don't have to sacrifice their lunch just to buy a 24-page comic. So I think that's really cool. I do think I would like to go to conventions when I start, but it's probably going to be somewhat limited. And, to me, doing what I'm doing right now, this is a convention. This is like a convention. I'm sharing my stuff with you. I make comics. You guys know that. Marsh Makes Comics, obviously, is the name of the YouTube channel. And if you want to find some free comics, go to donkeyjawprojects.com. So there's my little pitch. You can sign up for the newsletter and get some free comics. And also, there's free stuff just right on the site. So, anyways, that being said, I think we need to think about what are people doing in the comic industry that works. What are people doing well? There's a lot of debate on, Marvel and DC, the SJW versus Comicsgate, all that stuff. I don't necessarily want to get into that, but people do. There are people complaining about the stories and stuff in Marvel and DC. Some of them people make an argument that the stories are just not as good, really is what it comes down to. There's a lot of other stuff involved, politics and whatnot, but that's what the complaint is. And the sales do seem to kind of reflect that from what I can tell. I only can understand it from the numbers I can look at, and I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a, accountant. I'm not, a guy who understands, the numbers that well. But from what I can see that, the numbers aren't the greatest. Somebody selling novels and just regular books, they'll look at those sales and laugh like it's not even worth it, to do it in that realm. But there's a lot of things that go to it, and we're starting to see that crowdfunders are starting to get to the point where they're outselling. I think they're outselling. I could be wrong, or they're getting close to outselling. The actual, the typical traditional go through, the comic store type of situation. So, there are ways of going about it. And the thing is, if you're doing it on an indie level and you're doing it with crowdfunding, you and your team, which is a much smaller amount of people, most likely, is getting a larger share of the comic, money, if there is profit. A lot of times it just goes into printing and stuff like that. But, if there is profit, it's not cut so many ways that you get barely anything as a creator. It really depends. There's different ways to go about it. Some people are hired to make comics, so they make their rate whether the comic sells or not, and then maybe on the back end they may get some royalties. So, the thing is, though, is look at what's doing well. And it seems like the movers and the shakers in the world are some of these people doing new things. And, kind of taking a little bit of a sidestep from what the traditional comic book industry is doing, and thinking of new ways to open up, the market to reach into new markets. And there's one thing I've been saying for a while is that there's tons of people in the world, like tons of people in the world who love comics, can't get enough of comics. They just don't know it yet. I mean, it's so true. We just have not reached out to people, the way everybody, the perception is that comic books are for kids. Comic books are only superhero comics. Like that's like the unfortunate misconception a lot of times. But at the same time, these same people may or may not be reading manga and not realizing, wait a minute, this is comics too, or something like that. Or maybe, they found, Smile in the library and they read that. And, they don't think of some of these things as the typical comic book market. And so when they think about comic books, they think about kind of stuff that isn't necessarily representing the whole of what comics is and what comics can be. So, we have to kind of shift our minds about how we approach things. And, I think of myself as an author, like an author of a novel, so I can go into all different genres. And, if I make a comic book about, sports or something, why would I go to a comic book market, go to the comic book shop where most of those people may or may not, a lot of those people could care less about sports. In fact, a lot of those people hate sports, That's kind of what the community, why would I go there? But there's a whole huge, vast, community of people who love sports. If I can get my sports comic in front of those people's eyes, those people will start to realize, hey, comics are kind of cool. They don't have to be just about superheroes. There's so many ways to go about this. Whatever you're interested in, whatever you want to make a comic about, even if it is superheroes, maybe it's superheroes, but it's superheroes in the context of a school cafeteria. There are food fighting comic books in Japan that are outselling Batman in America, easily outselling. And it's like, there's tons of ways to do this. There's no reason. What about trying to actually, like, if you are into manga and stuff like that, what about trying to reach that audience? There's a huge manga reading audience in America. Why can't, people who are not Japanese creators reach that as well, Or maybe we can start creating manga even the way that Japanese people create it, from right reading from right to left, and put it in the Japanese language and see if we can, find a market over there. Even if we get a fraction of that, we'll probably be doing better than a lot of the comics in the main too. You know, it's just there's a lot of ideas. I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just saying that let's think outside of the box, as cheesy as that sounds. Let's think about other ways to do this. I will be getting to the chat guys as well. So please feel free to put your questions in there and your thoughts in there, and I'll be happy to chat with you. But I do want to get through some of my notes here. So let's see. Another thing is there's this thing called the where the world is right now. This is what's going on. There's also tablets, and comics show up really beautifully on tablets. But this is what's most convenient. It's in everybody's pocket at all times for the most part. People are affixed to these things. This is where the eyes are. This is where the ears are. We need to be spending some time thinking about our strategy on how to get our comics to people who are looking at their phones all day. Print is not going away. I think that print is still a huge part. A lot of people prefer print over digital. But also don't just think about this as, comics out. Let me get my comic on Comixology. That's actually, that's almost akin to trying to sell your comic through Diamond Distribution. Of course, that's one way you probably want to go because that is the main, comic market. Same thing with Comixology is probably one way, but so many other ideas of how we could distribute our comics digitally. You can do what I do, which is have your own website, and again, donkeyjawprojects.com, and you could put free comics on there for people to read, digital PDFs to download to their phone and read. That's kind of the way I do it. You could also have them for sale for, go the old school route and do a 25 cent, I don't know if you could do 25 cents, but do like $1 comic or whatever that people buy for $1. I've done that and people have bought it. It's pretty cool. They only have to pay $1 and they get a cool little story, there's so many different ways. There's Webtoons. Webtoons is a great place to do it. Personally, I'm used to the long form, page style of typical comics. So Webtoons is a little weird for me, but I'm not opposed to making a Webtoon type of comic. I think it's really cool. It's just a kind of a different way of doing it. There's other Tapas. There's so many other ways you can do this digitally. There's other ways that people haven't even thought about as well, or maybe people have thought about, but people haven't pursued so much. I mean, I'm here on YouTube. You know how many cool things we could do with comics on YouTube? Trust me, I'm thinking about them and trying to come up with some cool videos. I got a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike. I can't wait to share. But comics on YouTube people love video, and if you can, create a YouTube channel where you're entertaining people with comic with your comics in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of different things you could do. If you entertain people, they might be like, well, if they're that awesome with their videos, I want to check out their comics because their comics are probably really good too. It's when we're talking about comics, we're not in the we're in the comic industry, but the comic industry is like too small. What we're really in is we're in the entertainment industry, but we love to do comics. I personally, I may or may not, entertain the idea of getting a movie deal one day if I ever get to that level or whatever. That would be fine. That would be cool. But I'm focused on comics. Even if that happens, I'm hoping that that helps me have the money and the fuel and the time to work on more comics, because to me that's my love. So that's just some ways of thinking about it. There's so many other ways. Like, put if you guys have some ideas, put that in the chat. Let me know some of your ideas. There's some cool things. Again, how do other cultures sell comics? You go if you go to places like Europe and like France. They to them comics is like it's like a very prestigious kind of thing to create like a graphic novel, and they put them in very nice format of kind of hardcover books and things like that. It's something you would have on your coffee table or something, or however it is. Look at how they're doing comics. How do they sell it? What do they do well that we could replicate? I think about like coffee table comics. Jason Brubaker, he's kind of going that route, I feel like, a little bit. um Look at what they do in Japan. There's this thing that I found on YouTube. It's crazy. It's called the Manga Cafe. They have tons of them over in Japan, and this is a place where they people go. It's kind of like a comic book library, but it's also like a hotel, which is kind of crazy. Like, you can go there, rent a room, go find the comic you want to read, and sit down and read the comic. There's also like a computer in these little rooms, these kind of cubbies. They have different things. You could play video games in there. You could do all kinds of things. They have digital comics and I think anime and stuff. You could do all kinds of things in these rooms, and people actually. That's like a way that people date. They like will go for a date, and they will go, and each person or they'll pick like a manga or whatever, and they'll sit in the cubby and they'll read their little thing and stuff. And some people actually, it's actually cheaper than renting an apartment there to stay in one of these places, which is probably a weird thing. Like, I don't know, like, it seems kind of cramped. But anyways, it's a different idea, different way to kind of make comics interesting for people to be around and be involved with and stuff like that. This is just an idea. What about comic book vending machines? Like, people have talked about this, and maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know. But getting also, like, any way we can get comics into a place where people are is a great way to do it. Comics at the movie theater would be awesome. Comics on different newsstand, different ways of doing newsstand comics. I mean, like I said, Alterna is a big inspiration for me, and they're obviously going a little bit that route. Something that's interesting is Jim Shooter. Back when the they started going into, is it? It's not direct market. They started going to the comic shops and stuff instead of to the newsstands. They were moving to that because it was making a lot more money. But Jim Shooter and a few other people were really like, they were trying to say, yes, we need to do this. We need to go into the comic shops and start kind of moving that way with the comic industry. But we also need to keep the newsstands going, because that's people's entry point. They might not dive deep into the archives of Spider-Man, Superman, or whoever they want to check out, at the newsstand, but they're going to get into like a Sonic the Hedgehog, or like some kind of Star Wars comic, or maybe a Superman or Spider-Man. But, and then that'll lead them to, oh, I want to check out more. Where can I find more? And then they find out about comic book shops and they start digging in there. Having newsstand supports the comic shops. Comic shops are kind of dying, a dying breed right now. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And even if they do, there's other avenues that we're going right now that far surpass that, or will probably far surpass that. So what is the future of comics? It's of the comic book industry. Well, honestly, the future of the comic industry is right now. Like, we are living in the future of the comic industry. And if we're not taking advantage of it, I'm going to get into some more stuff with this that, we need to really take advantage. Basically, that actually does lead me into that. So one thing is these discussions again are happening online a lot. And I saw one on Facebook recently, and I saw one comment, and I don't even remember who the comment was or who even posted this post. And I saw a few comments, but one of them really stuck out to me and really actually got me a little bit frustrated. And they were basically saying that the consumers need to change is what is the answer to making the comic industry work again. Um, Boy, when I saw that, this is the thing, like, and this is, I'm not talking about any kind of political thing. I know there's the Comicsgate SJW stuff. I'm not even really talking about that. That might be where that was coming. But to me, I'm thinking about a business thing. I don't care about all that stuff. Um, you know, Asking the consumer to change, you're put it, it's such the wrong approach. It's so ridiculously the wrong approach. Um, it's not about the consumer changing. We don't make our comics. We shouldn't make our comics and then get pissed that people aren't getting into them and try to change the consumer to like what we have made. If we made a comic and it doesn't resonate with the consumer, that's on us. That's our own fault. I'm not saying that you have to make your comics specifically for people necessarily. There is the whole thing of do what you love and the money will follow, or make the comic that you would like to see. And hopefully your tastes match a lot of people. That does happen a lot, actually. And that is kind of a good strategy, but sometimes it's not the best strategy. So the thing is for me personally, I'm all about putting out as much comics as I possibly can, and the stuff that sticks sticks, and the stuff that doesn't, and that's okay. Um, Obviously, it takes a long time to make comics, so you know you can't really. It's hard to do that. But if you do a lot of little short stories and stuff, you can kind of start to gauge things. I have a lot of things I plan on doing with that. I've talked about the Retro Fresh Comics Explosion that I've been talking about. It's an anthology that I'm going to be doing. That's kind of an effort to do that, but also putting out these little small comics on my website and stuff like that. There's that. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of test the waters. And then, there's still your creation. There's still something you're really interested in making, but you can start to see what people are resonating with and what they're not. And then you can focus down on the things that people are resonating with. So that's kind of one way to go. But the thing is the consumer does not need to change. We need to change. We need to make the things that people like. Again, I put the whole caveat out there. Of course, if you have a vision and you just want to do your vision, do that. And you probably will do well. There's been a lot of people who have done single vision comics and they've done really well. But at the same time, we need to be listening to our audience. We need to be creating stuff that we still like and we're still really into, but also might appeal better to an audience. I don't know. That's the way I think of it. To me, I don't feel bad about creating something for an existing audience, because to me, my imagination runs wild. So I actually thrive when I have limitations on something I'm creating. So it's good for me to be like, okay, I want to make this comic that's super epic and it has superheroes and it has fantasy and it has sci-fi. It's got everything I could possibly ever want. But, if I do that, I'll get overwhelmed. I won't actually end up making the comic, or I will make the comic and it'll just be a mess. Like if I throw everything into one thing, it has been done before and sometimes it can work, but a lot of times, you can't always take that route. And a lot of times the project is going to be better when you set some artificial limitations on it. Um, so the thing is what is the future of comics? Like in the comic book industry, it is it's in the way the world has already changed for everything else. We have to understand like this world is really going, it's already here, it's in this direction. We're it's not even the future anymore, it is what it is. And we can't hold on to the old ways. The old ways are not working very well, and some of actually we can bring back some of the old ways because there's certain things that used to work that people aren't doing anymore, and they're suffering for it, as far as business and stuff like that. So there are actually some things we can learn from there's things I've been thinking about a lot. Superman, Batman, um Spider-Man, well, Doctor Strange, like a lot of these characters, Thor, Iron Man, I think too. I could be wrong. I forget like all of the different things, but a lot of these, super famous comic books, they didn't come out as a single title, Spider-Man, Superman, whatever. Superman came out in Action Comics. That's an anthology. There was other stories in that book, not just Superman. Same thing with Batman. It came out in Detective Comics. uh I think Thor came out from Journey into Mystery or something like that. All these comics came out from anthologies. We should start thinking about anthologies again. Not only that, when comic books were thriving, in America, superhero comics, they were one-shot stories for the most part. They were one-shot stories for every issue. So you could pick up, a Fantastic Four number, 78, and you didn't have to go back to number one. You could just read that comic and enjoy it for that one story, and you would get a sense of who the characters were. And you didn't need to have like these long, across different titles type of story that is convoluted and stuff. You got one comic book and you got one story. Maybe we should start doing more single story, issue stories. That's kind of the route I'm going. Again, these other comics were anthologies. A lot of times they'd be 8, 9, 10, 12 page stories, and there'd be 3 to 5 stories in these anthologies. Why aren't we doing more of that? Comics were doing really well with that. Even with single character titles, a lot of times there would be 2 or 3 stories of that one single character. Maybe we need to be bringing some of that stuff back. Maybe we need to be reintroducing newsstand into things, to get, kind of be the evangelist for comics. We need to get comics in front of people, the common people, because like I said, there's tons of people out there who absolutely love comics and graphic novels, but they just don't know it yet. I don't know. I really think that's the truth. And if you disagree with me, that's totally cool. I'd be happy to have more discussion in the comments section and in the chat. I'm going to get to the chat in a minute. Um, you know, and that's totally fine. I could be wrong about things for sure. I'm okay with being wrong about things because what I do is I course correct. When I see that I'm doing something wrong, I course correct and change I try to adapt, to things. And that's what we need to do in this industry. The future of comics is not, it's kind of like right now. And the thing is too is we have so many opportunities. We don't think about ways to get our comic out there. A lot of times I see a lot of creators who are closed-minded to a lot of different social media tactics and stuff when it comes to getting their comic out there. People hate Facebook, but they're there, but actually a lot of my traffic for my videos and for my comics and stuff comes from Facebook. When I've been involved with Kickstarters, most of the traffic came from Facebook. I don't love Facebook either, but there are some really good things about Facebook. Facebook groups, so there are really crappy groups, but there's really good ones. Facebook DMs. That's another good thing. Facebook ads. People think that, the algorithms of these websites are against them. Really, the algorithms of these websites are there to keep people on that site and to bring good content that actually serves the person who's, on the website. So all we have to do is create content that's exciting, interesting, shareable, and we need to start getting it out in a better way. You might have a comic, but there's like 10 other ways that you can kind of chop and slice that kind of content and maybe make some little bit extra bonus content that reflects what you're doing in your comic and get people excited about it. You were excited when you came up with the idea for the comic. Share that excitement. Trust me, that excitement is infectious and people get into it. We haven't even scratched the surface of what we can do with promoting our comics. One thing, again, I was going to say was Facebook ads. And this also, it's Facebook/Instagram ads, Instagram story ads, things like that. Some of us have tried it and sunk some money into it, and it's expensive. You have to play with money that you can use that can be expendable, but I think it's worth trying to get into things like Facebook and Instagram ads. Right now it's really cheap to do that, whereas like years from now it's going to be more like coming up with the money to do a commercial that's like, on a prime time show or something. That's what Facebook and Instagram and all these other social media site ads are going to be. But right now, anybody can get in on it, and for a pretty small amount of money. And if you find a way to finally get some traction with that, then you can start pouring a good amount of money in, because that money will come back to you, or that influence will come back to you in a good way. So it's worth exploring, is all I'm saying. These algorithms are not against you, especially YouTube. A lot of people talk about the algorithms of YouTube and stuff, and how their stuff doesn't get out to their subscribers and stuff, and you just got to work with the algorithm. They want to serve video for the end user that end user will actually like. So if a lot of times we're not doing our job, we're not making good enough videos, and it doesn't have to be super amazing quality and editing and stuff. It just has to be interesting and exciting and genuine, honest. Things like that are things that work in video format. So, I'm not going to get into all that so much, but all I'm trying to say is we can't be closed-minded to the way the world is going. The world is going digital. The world is going with iPhones and communities on social media sites. I mean, that's where people's attention is at. We need to get in front of that with our comic books. We can't say, well, I don't like, social media. I don't like phones. I mean, we can say that, and there are ways to still make a living in comics and totally ignore that stuff, but it's getting harder to do that. I believe it's getting harder to do that. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with this stuff. This stuff right now, this is what, compare like when TV started becoming a thing and radio kind of started going down and TV started going up. That's where we're at right now with the internet. We're actually in such an opportune time right now to make our comics work. We've never been in a better place to make comic books work. And like I said, you might disagree with me, but this is what I feel, and I could be wrong, but I think I have something going here that makes sense. But again, we'll have this discussion. We'll continue this discussion. Let's get over to the chat. Hopefully, you guys are into this and enjoying it. A lot of my friends are here. Thank you for all the new subscribers. If you're here, thank you for subscribing. And if anybody wants to get into more of this kind of talk, I do a lot of videos on this type of stuff, and I share stuff to help people make their comics and inspire people to make their comics. There's a lot of cool stuff on this channel. So if you want to, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment in the comment section. That all helps the channel and is really great. And I always respond to every comment here on YouTube, especially. My buddy Ronnie's here. What's up, man? Dylan, seriously, we talked to him. He said there's Comixology, and we talked about that a little bit. Michael Michael Myers, what's up? Dylan Searcy, Ninja Turtles. Yeah, Ninja Turtles is a great. I love thinking about the Ninja Turtles. They're such a great example. I mean, you don't even have to be that. This is what Ninja Turtles teaches me. You don't. And I love Kevin Eastman, and I love those guys. But you don't. It kind of shows me you don't have to be an amazing artist. You don't have to be Jim Lee, status. You don't have to be Greg Capullo status. Um, and you can come up with a crazy idea. That's the other thing. What the heck is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? So nowadays it's just normal. But that's not a normal thing. That was so when I remember when that first came out, everybody was like, this is so weird, but I kind of think it's awesome. That's what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was. So that's kind of a good point of you can make just the weird thing that you want to make and still do well. If you have an idea and a vision, work that vision. Most social media tactics, most comic book ideas work, but you just have to work it. That's the thing. A lot of people give up. They don't believe in what they're doing, so they give up on it. And the thing is most of these tactics and things work. Whichever one makes sense to you, do that and go full steam ahead. Give it, however long you think it would take. Maybe you give it 6 months before you're like, okay, this isn't getting any traction. Maybe you give it a year or 2 years before you're like, okay, you have to eventually evaluate and say, okay, are people responding to this at all? If they're not, then maybe you can give it up, but give it a good shot. Believe in what you're doing and believe in the different tactics and techniques and strategies you might be using and go forth with it hardcore as you can. And the things that you see people responding to, double down on those. And you'll start to see how things start to build. You start to get a sense of what you can actually do and what your place will be in this comic book industry. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a great example. I mean, and also remember, when you see an amazing example like that, that's an outlier a lot of times. Not everybody can do that. Like a lot of times, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when they came out, you started seeing a lot of people coming up with like similar ideas that were like, kind of hybrids of that. And it's like they were trying to jump on the weird train and do the same thing, but you can't. They did it. You got to do your own thing. Know who you are, be authentic to who you are, and do that thing. That's the way to go, man. In my opinion. Um, Tim says, "Nice hat, thanks." I need to get an Alterna hat one of these days because I really, again, I'm like a Alterna fanboy here. Peter Cimenti's an awesome dude, and I think what he's doing is amazing. Again, newsstand. I've been wanting to do newsprint forever, and I just thought it wasn't possible. Then I saw what Alterna was doing, and I'm like, yes, this is what we got to do. So I'm all about that. And the cheap price it is, the cheap entry it is to just get in and be like, oh, it's only $1.50. Sure, I'll try it out. Like that is powerful. Like we have to realize that our comics are not necessarily like they're our comics are not, issue one of our comic book series is not the end product. The end product is maybe the graphic novel. There's also, you can have all kinds of swag around it. Maybe, to me, that's the entry point. Like, I want to get an issue one out so I can give it away for free. I want people to get into the story. Once people are hooked into the story, then you have places you can go with that. It's about getting that attention, and the thing is we have such an amazing opportunity to get attention right now. It's all about working hard at it. If you're willing to work hard at what you are passionate about, I think the sky's the limit, really. Dylan's here. What's up, man? Oh, I already said that. Let's see. Dylan says there aren't any comic stores near where I live. Yeah, and the thing is this thing right here, it opens the possibility up for so much more distribution. We talk about distribution, and the the only thing that really holds us back and is really tough is the shipping. That's a tough one to get around. But in America, if somebody doesn't have a comic book shop, and if you live in America and somebody doesn't have a comic shop near them, there's the post office. That's your distribution. The crowdfunding. It's a great way to do it. People are into the crowdfunding thing. That's one way to do it. I feel it sucks if you're in a place where you can't. You have to order all this stuff because it is expensive to pay for shipping and stuff. So I feel you on that one, Dylan. But you can more readily get comics, and also for really cheap, if you have a tablet or you have a phone, you can read your comics on that. So there's still ways to get comics. It's just not as convenient if you happen to not be near a comic shop. Um, but I mean, honestly, sometimes my comic shop doesn't have what I want and I have to order it online. So there's all kinds of different aspects to it. Let's see. What's up, Funny Animator? How you doing? Thanks for coming in. He says comics are cool. They are cool. I love comics. They're like the bee's knees. uh, Brody, what's up? How you doing, man? Thanks. He says thanks for the inspiration and the time. Anytime. I love doing this, and I love being helpful to people. So again, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to go through the chat here for a few more minutes, and or any comments, anything you want me to comment on, I'll try to get to all of this. Let's see. This old stonerd, stonerd. I like that. That's interesting. Been a comic animation fan all my life. Born in the 50s, most people have only discovered it since the movies. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is everybody's got an entry point, and I can't, blame anybody for their entry point. I'm a big 90s hip hop guy. And I got deep into the underground of hip hop and stuff. But some of my entry points were things like MC Hammer and like this is all I knew because I was just a white dude in like suburban in suburbia, and so I knew like Vanilla Ice, MC Hammer. Arrested Development went a little bit deeper, but they were still, Mr. Wendell, yeah, like that stuff, like that was something that I really like dug. And then there was like Humpty Dance, Digital Underground, things like that, like, and all these other like Gangstar and all these deeper stuff. It says my connection is unstable, but hopefully you guys are still seeing me. Let me know if there's an issue. I am going to be ending it somewhat soon, but I did want to get to the rest of this chat. So yeah, as everybody's got different entry points, and that's the thing. Like with the movies, it would be great if in the movies that are so popular, they would say, "Hey, if you want to get deeper into some of these stories, go to your local comic book store." There have been some little bits of that, but not enough. That comics should be booming right now, and they're not because they don't try to, kind of get people into it off of the movies. It is what it is. Like I said, it'd be cool if there was comic books in movie theaters. I mean, even if there was free promotional comics with every Avengers movie you go to, or every, comic book movie you go to, like the tickets are I mean, the concessions and the tickets are expensive enough. Why not throw in a little ash can in there, and say, hey, check this out. It'll show you a little bit information about the movie and maybe a little, 6-page story or something about the character that you're, checking out. Why not, And then maybe like a little ad, go to your local comic shop for more. I mean, that would be awesome, but I can't control what Hollywood does, None of us really can unless we're in Hollywood. Mako Seda, how you doing? Would you sell outside a con? Like outside an actual convention? That probably would be something they wouldn't like you to do. But I don't know if that's what you're saying or just not at a con, selling different. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm talking about here. I mean, conventions to me is part of the old way of doing it that I think you still should do that. You still should do things like diamond distribution. You still should do Comixology and stuff like that. But those are like the more traditional routes. All I'm saying is there's so much more we can do, So I definitely would sell outside of a con. Let's see. How do you get permission to sell comics at different places? Well, the way that people typically distribute is through diamond distribution, and that's not always easy. And you have to. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to even get to that deal, especially if you're an indie creator, or you could work for Image, DC, Marvel, even Alterna. You could do comic for them, and that way you can more easily be distributed through Diamond. And that distribution goes out to the comic shops maybe if people order them, and there's other distribution ways as well. You can pursue new what are newsstand deals, which basically is magazine racks or any kind of place where they have like books and stuff that they sell. And there's probably others too. Maybe go to mom and pop shops and just ask them. Places that aren't big corporate places, you can go and ask them. Maybe there is an opportunity to go to like an RPG gaming shop or something like that, or a video game place, and say, "Hey, can I set up? Can you sell my comic there? Like maybe even create some kind of stand or whatever." Like a cardboard stand that has like your logo or whatever on there, and say, "Hey, could I set this up?" Even maybe just say, "Hey, these are free comics. Can I put this somewhere in your store?" They might be willing to do that, or maybe just for cheap, or whatever. But one thing, I wouldn't try to make money from that. I would try that. To me is like a promotional opportunity. Even if they sell them and get a little money for themselves, I would almost just be like, you guys, I don't need money from this. But there are ways to do it where you actually get paid back a little bit as well. But the store has to make money from it, or else it's not worth their time and their space. So yeah, there's ways to go about it. Hey Ryan, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming by. Yeah, great talking points. Thanks, man. They need to bring back the original Turtles. I agree. I mean, you can have access to it, I think, now in different ways. But like, there's a lot of comic reprints of the old ones too, and they're doing a lot with the Ninja Turtles. It seems like Ninja Turtles is everywhere I look. um, RR, hi there. He likes my videos, or she. Thanks for uploading. Thanks, man. I'm so happy that you're here. For sure. Ryan says, "Do you think comics will still be animation less in 5 to 10 years?" Yes, yes. I think you're talking about kind of like the more interactive comics, or there's motion comics and things like that. Takes a lot of time to do animation. So I think there's just always going to be comics in the format that they are. They may be less or more, I don't know. But people love comics. And I mean, there's still novels. People read them on Kindles, people read physical versions. Um, yeah, it's all going to still be here, I think. I think yeah, I mean, it's not like a weird fad like an 8 track, or what do they call those, I don't know, like a laser disc or like the tape or whatever. It's not as much a format as a medium, and I think it's here to stay. But there probably will also be more interactive comics and more motion comics. But I mean, I kind of think of it like 3D. Like 3D kind of finally found its place in theater, but it's still like people sometimes prefer just regular, movies, and it's not for every movie. It's like, to me, it's like a novelty that sometimes you're into and sometimes you're not. But for a long time, they've been trying to get 3D into movies, and I think it's probably still on the rise, especially with VR and stuff like that. Hey, VR comics, I'm sure that's going to be a thing if it's not already. There's a lot of ways that comics will go, but I don't think that the basic comic book will, I don't think it'll ever go away. I could be wrong, but I don't think it will. Let's see. Okay, Ryan said it froze for a second, but I'm back now. Good. My buddy Ronnie Gunter, how you doing, man? He says, I say make both kinds of comics. Say you make a comic that a person is really into. Sometimes they will pick up your out of this world idea comic because of your other work. Yeah, absolutely. I think just keep making a lot of different things. Whatever you want to make it. But I think even when I'm making something that I feel like is just something I want to make, I can't help it. I have my eye and my ear kind of to the streets, and I so to speak, and I feel like I'm always considering what people might like, um, even if it's a weird idea. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but for me, I just tend to think that way, So Diary of Ravens. When I was a kid, I used to love going to the next town over to the comic store. I used to have a bunch of comics, but I have no idea whatever happened to them. That's the story of a lot of people for sure. As far as not knowing what happened to their comics. Yeah, I have a lot of great memories going to comic shops as a kid. When I found out they existed, I was there as much as I possibly could be. It's like my place. I still, when I go to a comic shop, it's like my place of zen, and I go there and I relax. And usually I end up this is a little bit TMI, but usually I end up having to go to the bathroom because like my body relaxes. Like it's so weird. And it's the same thing with like bookstores and like music stores and stuff too. It's a comfortable place where I like to be. I'm not there as often as I like, a lot of times. And I've met a lot of cool people at comic shops too. I've gotten to know some of my best friends have been found at comic shops and having, discussions and stuff. So that's another cool thing. And that's a big part of this whole thing too, is when you're promoting your comic, you want to get the audience involved. Audience involvement in all kinds of media, in music, in art, and movies, and all this kind of stuff has become a huge part of what we're doing now as a culture. Any way you could possibly get people involved and the community involved in what you're doing, that's a huge part of it. And people want to be connected. They don't want to be away from, people need people, I feel like. And I don't know, it's so much better when you can share something you love with your friend. Interested in me, like Marshall Lee, like I want to know more about you. I want people to get so much into my stuff that I'm like lost in the shuffle even. Like I want my characters to be the highlights of what I do, so I want stuff that people will share, not because they want to share me as much as they want to share this cool fun experience they had with another friend of theirs who also they think would have that cool fun experience. And I want them to be able to build a friendship, and just kind of enhance their friendship through the stuff I make. That would be really cool. Like I know I've done that with things. Like I've connected with people on how much I love Stranger Things or whatever, and it's really fun to connect with my friends over those kind of things. So think about that also when you're creating and when you're putting your stuff out there. Let's see. Aggressively relaxing. I love that. I think you've been commented over here before. I love that title. Did you see the new Hickman X-Men is giving away flower seeds as a promotion? I did not, and that sounds very interesting. I always love like fun little promotional things that are genuine and just different and interesting. I think that's a great way to go about it. There's this Seth Godin book called The Purple Cow, and it's like the idea of it is if you were to look into a field and there's like tons of cows out there, you're going to see them and you're going to see a group of cows, and it's cool. It's like, oh, cool, I get to see the cows today. But if one of those cows is purple, which one are you going to notice? You're going to notice the purple one. And that's the same thing with comics. There's ways to stand out. Look at what everybody's doing. Maybe do something similar, but different enough so that people are like, "Oh, what's that? That's interesting." I'm curious to see what's going on with that. It's a very good strategy. And also, it makes for just something interesting to read and check out. Let's see. Ryan says he's talking to Diary of Ravens. I used to take trips downtown all the time and buy comics too. Used to be a place called Bargain Comics. Was really fun to go whenever I got could scratch together enough coin. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's super fun. Um, yeah. Okay. So they're talking amongst each other. A funny animator says, "I have an iPad, so there is there an app that I can use to make comics with on that?" Yes, I think people use Procreate on iPads. I could be wrong. I don't have a tablet. I wish I did. But I think people use Procreate to at least do illustrations, and I think you can make comics on it too. I'm not sure. I use Clip Studio Paint, which is a really awesome program. I'm not sure if it's supported on tablets. I think there is some form of Photoshop, probably Photoshop Express. um, any app that can do art and do it well, can be used to make comics. I don't have a tablet, so I don't know for sure. But I know that people are making comics on tablets. So I would definitely say um, that I would definitely say to look into that. I'm sure if you type that into YouTube, you'd be able to find, making comics on an iPad Pro or whatever it is you have. I'm sure you'd be able to find some people talking about it. I wish I had the answer. Um, and I wish I had a tablet so I could do it as well. Hey, Ryan Barnes, my first super chat. Thanks, man. That's so awesome. Um, he says, any chance we'll see more of SETI? A lot of you might not know who SETI is, but in the first 100 Days Making Comics anthology, Life in Space anthology, I created a comic called The Hitchhiker, and the main character was an alien named SETI. And yes, I definitely plan on doing more Hitchhiker stories. I've done some writing and stuff. I'm looking forward to doing that. It's probably not in the near future, but who knows? It might be. I might do a short story for the anthology, the Retro Fresh Comics Explosion anthology that I'm working on. I may very well do a short story for that, and I do want to develop that more because I do like it. It's like my way of playing around in a universe that's sort of like Star Wars, but it's my own thing. So yeah, I'm excited to get back to that when I have a chance. Geo Flay or Fla, I don't know. If I make mini comics, how would you try to sell those comics? Mini comics are great at like zine conventions and comic book conventions, like smaller ones. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people sell there. I've sold mini comics there. That's a great way to do it. I've also sold a lot of mini comics on my website, in the store on my website. I mean, anywhere you can sell, I think Etsy maybe is kind of a good place. But Etsy, there's a lot of issues with Etsy these days. But that's a place, wherever you can however you can get attention and then have a way to sell those comics. Use even just a PayPal button, or show them even on Instagram. You can show your stuff there and say, hey, DM me if you want one of these, and you can just have somebody, PayPal you the money or something. I've done things like that as well. There's a million and one ways to sell anything. And, just think of it too as a mini comic tends to be kind of in the market of like handmade things. So if you kind of think of it like that, maybe even a fair, some kind of art fair or something, you could probably sell there as well. There's a lot of different ways. So hopefully that's helpful. um, West Side. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. But Procreate is on iPad Pro. Other iPads don't have it. It has to be downloaded. Okay, so you have to have an iPad. Yeah, I don't know so much again about. But I think even if it's not an iPad Pro or if it's another kind of tablet, I think where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm sure there's a way to make comics on all these apps, even if it's just for fun on like an MS Paint type of thing, which is probably the worst program to make comics on. But again, where there's a will, there's a way. I bet I could make comics on my phone if I really wanted to try, to make it happen that way. But luckily, I have other tools, thankfully. Ronnie says, I think they do have VR comics now. You would be the one who would know, man. Ronnie makes interactive comics actually, and so I would be curious to see what a VR comic looks like. Be interesting. Diary of Ravens says, I have really enjoyed your channel since I came across it. It has been a huge help to me in many ways. I appreciate what you do. Oh, I thank you so much, man, or woman. I don't know. Thank you so much. That's really cool, and I'm just going to keep making more videos, and I hope I'm able to continue to be helpful and inspirational in whatever it is that people like to see. Um, oh, we say day. That's how you would say that name. Okay, cool. So I think that's going to be it, guys. We've gone a little bit over an hour. Hopefully, this was helpful for everyone. Hopefully, you guys dug it. Thank you for everybody who participated in the chat, and also everybody in watching later on. Please feel free to put your comment below and let me know what you think. What your thoughts on are for how to what the future of the comic book industry is and where we're going, and how to kind of navigate that as a comic book creator. Yeah, that's about it. Again, you can find my stuff at donkeyjawprojects.com. There will be videos that are linked to some of my videos that people really like, if you want to see more of stuff from my channel. And other than that, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate you, and thanks for hanging out with me. All right, I'll talk to you later.